On theme from that last video of like that dude, I found out he was African. I didn't know he was, but I guess I don't know. He was kind of yelling. His mouth was open. He was like, "Black people need to act better, cause black people hate when you want to be doctors." You know, he was that dude. So yeah, my beard right now, I shaved it. It gets itchy easily, so I'm just gonna be like rubbing this shit throughout the video. It's a woman mannequin. That's amazing. And it's basically her talking about her journey, and she's talking about, how they basically said, she's not black enough for black people and too black for everyone else. So I wanted to hear her testimony. I want to hear her story. I've already listened to a good amount of it, so I'm going to start like kind of in the middle because it's a 35-minute video, and y'all know I'll be rambling.
Are being so disingenuous. I hate that. Stop victimizing black people when black people victimize each other. Stop adding that extra layer because you're making the actual racism and victimization of black people by other races, including white people, including everybody, because everybody has issues with black people and black culture. So times when that actually happens feels flat because we're having to combat these extra trumped up charges you done put on here. That the real shit get.
See, she ate that one thing. I already started the video. She ate that one thing. She's right. It reminds me of that video. I always reference this video that happened on TikTok a while back, earlier in the year, I believe, where there was this black woman and she was saying, basically, I'm scared of hood people, or confessions I didn't want. I forgot the format. They have different formats for like TikTok trends, but.
So this woman came on Beyonce's internet and said this bullshit. I used to be afraid to admit this as a black person, but I am not afraid anymore. I get really nervous and anxious when I'm around hood people. See, this is why some of y'all don't need a phone. Some of y'all don't need access to social media. You should have to take a test. You should have to fill out an application before you just post it, like before you just allowed to post it, because this is what I'm talking about. You got these silver spoon coons like this that don't know the difference between hood culture and criminals.
Who said that?
What you mean to say is that you get nervous around criminals, but your smooth brain associates criminals with being ghetto, being in poverty, and being in the hood. Newsflash, you can be the most hood, most ghetto person ever and not be a criminal. There are criminals in every business, every job site, every tax bracket, every race, every culture, everywhere. The difference is when hood, ghetto, black people commit crimes, it's easy to tell who the criminal.
Hello and welcome to the 10th episode of the Random Talks, where we speak of everything on the interweb that kind of rocked my little world I got over here. A woman on the astonishing app TikTok stated, "I used to be afraid to admit this as a black person, but I get really nervous and anxious around hood people." Now, there was a discussion that this comment was very anti-black. And I first want to start this off with reading and describing what anti-black is and the
of people.
I'ma say this, no nuance, no explanations. If you are black and you are afraid of ghetto people, you are whitewashed. They got you deep in the brain. And I'm not even gonna go further.
The amount of losers that have gotten on here and said, oh, hood must mean criminal, must mean black person. That's what that means. Losers. Then this one dude got on here, bro, is like perpetually a loser.
It was like something I was scared to say. I'm scared of hood people, or something I was scared to say as a black person. And so many black people were sitting there upset, right? So many black people also understood, but a good amount of black people were like, we ain't worried about your sorry ass, your scary ass, and being very antagonistic. I understand in some form or fashion why they would feel that way, considering that it creates this narrative, making it seem like, oh, people from the hood are like bad, they ruffians, they evil, certain stereotypes of people from the hood that is not good. I understand that. But on the other hand, sitting there being antagonistic, saying you're gonna beat that bitch up, or sitting there saying certain stuff where it's like, oh, you scary, oh, well, I'm gonna beat your ass, or certain stuff like that, kind of proves the person's point in terms of them feeling uncomfortable or feeling like something bad gonna happen to them to begin with, right? And I remember, as somebody who grew up in the suburbs, I understand certain dynamics where there is a cultural difference, right? Not everybody grew up slap boxing. Now, if you slap box, there's nothing wrong with that, but not everybody grew up with that particular type of culture. Some people are what you would consider whitewash, or some people would be what I would consider hood adjacent. And that's basically where you grew up in the suburbs, but you also been acclimated around not necessarily being somebody from the hood, but being around people who grew up in the hood. Certain kind of picking up certain things, certain types of ideas, certain types of ways people speak because they grew up in that particular type of culture. Now, again, that does not mean that you are in the hood. You still would be considered whitewash or suburban or whatever from a lot of different black people. But you wouldn't necessarily be somebody who's completely unknowing, considering that you have people like that you associate with, that you talk to, that's in your family. So you're not completely disconnected necessarily, right? If one of your cousins or so and so, somebody wanted you to be around them, be in those types of communities, then you would, right? That's the whole thing, right? I don't really hear a lot of people talk about that particular type of dynamic. It's either you in the hood or you ain't in the hood. Not when you kind of just you just be around different types of places. But nevertheless, what she's saying is true. I do feel that we have an issue in the black community where we do not like to have accountability. And the problem I also have with it is that a lot of the people that hold space, or a lot of people that make room to say black people need to be held accountable, are people who at the same time uphold anti-blackness the most. A good amount of people who say we need to hold black people accountable are black conservatives, people who are black who are aligned with white supremacists, people who are basically the Uncle Toms of the community. Those are the main ones who have this particular type of belief of we need to hold black people accountable, instead of the people who are pro-black liberation. You hear them say it from time to time, and they have their own ways of saying it, but they kind of like to beat around the bush. Whereas if you had people like who were in the Black Conservative Party, the Black Republican Party, or had some of the similar stories that she has of growing up and having to deal with that particular type of trauma of being told you're not black enough. Maybe you hold resentment or certain issues of not fitting into a certain ideal of what it means to be black. Then you kind of go around and you say, we need to sit here and hold black people accountable. And people start to kind of question the legitimacy of that. Even though there could be valid points in your critiques, people will question the legitimacy of actually trying to help people behind those critiques, simply due to the fact that the person has a history of being anti-black. The person has a history of trying to trivialize slavery, racism, and other issues that happen towards the black community. So I think that's the biggest problem as well, is that we need to have a particular type of understanding of holding black people accountable without also feeling the need to uplift white supremacy. And for some reason, certain dynamics within the community, outside the community, I have yet to see that actually be done in a healthy way. But yeah.
So I tried to squeeze it in whenever I could. I would be like, oh yeah, I'm from Decatur. Decatur wears great. Because I wanted to fit in. I just thought the best place to fit in was somewhere where I would be a shoo-in. And I'm like, I'm black, they're black, I listen to rap, they listen to rap, I watch 106 in Park, they watch 106 in Park, it'll be great. Bitch, no, that's not enough. I didn't have the mannerisms, and I watched way too much cartoons. I know what I should have done to bridge the gap, because I saw a girl do it. There was a girl, she was really shy, just like me. She used to read books. Me and her actually talked one day because we found out we were reading the same book. What she did is she started dating one of the popular black guys. And this man was butt ugly. Through dating him, she got to know the other black people, and they got to be familiar with her. And by the time we were seniors, this bitch was popular. And I was like, damn, I should have did that shit. If I really wanted to be popular, should have just used some guy. Would I have done it? I think I probably wouldn't. Definitely makes me feel
low-key,
like...
though, that is a good method, because there's a lot of people who... they are not even black, but if they have like a black partner and they will be into black spaces by association, or they could be into black spaces by association, there's a reason why you see a lot of dudes, maybe they have girlfriends. That's usually the particular archetype that I see, where you have like a black dude, he has like a Hispanic girlfriend or like a white girlfriend, and she may feel real comfortable saying the N-word. She may feel real comfortable saying it around certain people. I had somebody in my own family who, this is why people be coming for interracial dating. Basically, her father obviously came with his girl, and she was a white woman. Nothing wrong with that. The problem was that I found out, when you with family and then they got like somebody else is like a new person coming into the family, or and they like, oh yeah, she be talking kind of crazy. She be sitting there acting kind of crazy. She be acting ghetto. She be saying the N word. And I was kind of just shook because I was like, oh, like she's like one of those type of people, right? And it's just kind of one of those things where it's like if other people outside of the culture can be acclimated into the black community just by having a certain connection or they will feel comfortable, there's a reason for that. Because if you are somehow associated with somebody who's black, that gives you access.
You don't want to pursue academic pursuits. You don't want to make too good of grades in school. You don't want to look like you're trying too hard. There was an idea that
Okay, so no, okay. This one right here is really confusing me because this was something that the other dude said on why he hated being black, right? And I was kind of confused because I'm like, on one hand, I understand why they're saying that because there is this thing for some reason in the black community where it's like, oh my God, it's not just like, okay, I'm gonna come for you for being smart. It's also, I'm gonna come for you for being stupid, right? This roasting culture that goes into the black American community. Even other Africans have talked about how they come to like, America and they're getting acclimated to like the different types of cultures and how they felt bad because a lot of black Americans treated them like shit when a lot of black Americans was roasting them. I don't really even know the origins of why roasting even became something that was associated with certain ways that we talk to each other. We just roast each other. And I guess if you got tough skin, then it's like, okay, we could be friends. That's kind of just like a thing, right? But I have noticed that there was this particular type of thing where, like I said in the other video, there would be people who, if I'm being honest, they would be considered ditzy, or they would be considered like, they would act slow, right? Or they would sit there and they would just be like the funny person, and they would be the smartest person in the class. The smartest, I'm kid you not, they would be the smartest person in the class. Damn near a mathematician, always having A's in certain curriculums, like, will always be an A on the roll, but they kept up this facade, right? Or they kept up a certain aspect of their personality. They put that at the forefront of themselves so they wouldn't look like they are too, distanced from this idea of blackness. And I really want to know more on why. I wish I could like have a debate with people, have a conversation with people, and just really want to know why that's something that is so heavily embedded within like black culture, like black youth, even to this day. Maybe you can see it within like Gen Alpha when you're going to like classrooms and stuff like that. But
my other videos, it's called It's Not That Deep. My little brother is far more integrated into black culture. My little brother is 16, 17. He's firmly within Gen Z, and he is living the life that I would have loved to have lived. His grades are not good, and we're the opposite in that regard. Where he is flourishing socially, he is not doing so well academically, and he puts a lot of weight on social interactions and things in a way that I couldn't because I just didn't have that option. It was really hard for me to make friends. Not only was I called an Oreo, but I was sheltered, so I couldn't really go anywhere or do anything anyway. But you don't want to do something because it's lame, You're like, I don't want to take school too seriously. I don't want to take this hobby that I'm into too seriously because I don't want people to make fun of me because it's not that deep. Okay, I found another article where it says terms like coconut and Oreo, meaning brown on the outside, white on the inside. I'm like, wait a minute. And I see it's from stylist.co.uk. So apparently people in the UK are being called coconuts, and I assume, what's that other thing I said? Mounds bars. That's not it. Bounties. They're being called coconuts and bounties across the pond. Sorry, I just realized I have strawberries on the stove. Let me go get my strawberries burned. I'm so sad. I feel like it ultimately boils down to this.
That interesting as a black American that's happening in the UK, right? I don't know. Now, some of the UK people gonna get upset at me, right? Because sometimes it's like, I remember that there's black people from the UK, but the way I see it is that I kind of like, oh yeah, there's black people in the UK. Then I realize like, oh wait, they're African. So I'm kind of just like, oh, they came from Africa, right? They came from Africa more than you would sit there and say a black American came from Africa. And the reason this matters to me in terms of like when I'm talking about like the diaspora dynamics and stuff like that is that when she's sitting there talking about this is an article that was, something based in the UK and saying that they're calling each other like whitewashing the UK, I do wonder what kind of dynamic that is, considering that even though other people around the world do call themselves black and they do acknowledge themselves as black, it's still, to me, how I see it, is contextualized a bit differently than it is in America, where so much of your culture is based off of being black. Whereas if you were somebody who was British and you were somebody who was, let's say, like Nigerian, or you were somebody who was Kenyan, you were somebody who came from like Africa. You have roots there that you can like trace back specifically, and you kept some of that African tradition with you in Europe. I do think that there's a different way that that will be formatted when we're talking about being whitewashed, considering that, you know, the way they view blackness may not be the same. But I do find it also interesting that that is maybe a possibility or a possible dynamic that persists even beyond black Americans, showing that it is not something that is solely just based within the black American dynamics, but it could be also something that's seen within a lot of different ways. A lot of different places that black people are in, or there's a predominantly black community, especially within the school. So maybe it is something that goes more beyond just the space of black American academia, you know, and socialization within black American communities. But who knows, right? Who knows? I'm not going to sit here and act like I know everything right now. I'm just, you know, saying my thoughts.
Right here. I'm not black enough for my community, but I'm still an outsider with my white friends. I live in downtown Atlanta. I live in a very diverse area, so I have all types of friends. I have friends from all ethnicities. But if you live in a place or an area where everybody is very segregated, then I can only imagine how hard that must be. I'm sure that's also part of the reason why I'm single. Even though Atlanta is very diverse in terms of making friends, there's definitely the feeling that Atlanta is very black. It's a great place for people who are black and are of black culture. I feel like there's a lot more diversity within whiteness, and I envy that shit. Like, I feel like I would have been found my tribe if I was white. I feel like white people really get the freedom because they're the majority. They really get the freedom to like be who they want to be. And also, thing about white culture that I love really is that they encourage people to be individuals and to be unique, and that is not what I experienced inside of black culture. I experienced a lot of pressure to conform and being outcasted when I did not. Does that make me resent my own people? Bitch, I'm gonna be honest, yes. Oh my God, I'm so frustrated. Do I put white people on this pedestal? No. But I think that there are some things that we can definitely learn from them. Like, it's okay to have diverse interests, and it's okay to be weird. I think maybe just we're a minority, and when you are...
I don't think that we should learn from white people. Now, because like I said, that is what white privilege is. I said that white privilege is not being somebody who is superhuman. White privilege does not mean that you're exempt from trauma, exempt from the hard times of the world. There's a lot of white people who grew up in poverty. There goes the air fryer. There's a lot of white people who grew up in toxic homes. You know, whiteness isn't this thing that can cause you to like not have to deal with stuff. I mean, just take a good amount of, you know, Trump supporters now. That whole fiasco that's happening with Elon Musk, where he basically said, we're going to have to get people from engineers from outside of America, which basically he's doing it not because they're smarter, but because he's going to sit there and have them on a visa, which means that he gets to pay them less, right? That's the whole reason that we're having this whole thing with the immigrants. You know, if you're under a visa, yes, you could get paid a good amount depending on your position, but you also will get paid less. If you are somebody who, you know, is in America, you are American, you had your degree and got everything through being an American citizen, you have a right to ask for a higher pay, a higher salary. And so it's easier to get somebody from outside the States, especially if they're under a visa. There's a certain power dynamic where the person, the employer, could sit there and put them into this country at lower rates, right? And so I just wanted to get that out the way. But anyway, a lot of white Americans, you know, they're having issues with that because they had this particular type of belief that, you know, Trump was going to sit there and get them in certain places. This rich, you know, billionaire was going to get them into certain spaces, and they are now understanding a repeat of history before, like I said, where there was a lot of white people who were poor. There was even white people who were with slaves back in the day. However, they still decided to be racist to make themselves feel better for the fact that they didn't have shit. And so, when you have, you know, racist ass white people, you know, when you have white people in general, they could be woke, not woke, liberal, conservative, whatever, right? We're all different. But when you have this generalization, this thing called whiteness, I don't think that black people should learn anything from whiteness. I think we've learned enough, actually. I think we've taken enough, actually. I think we've we've done enough to try to find our way to integrate with whiteness, to try to find a way to make that work. Some people, they have marriages, relationships, kids with white people. Again, we've done enough. Everything's good. Okay, fine. But I don't think that we should learn anything from white people in the grand scheme of things, because at the end of the day, we need to focus on us, and we need to focus on what we're going to do as a people, instead of focusing so much on how we're going to, take inspiration from white people. I think we take inspiration from white people too much. I think we look towards white people too much, right? And I think that that's a big problem.
I don't feel valued within black culture, but I also don't feel valued by anybody. I don't feel like anybody values the person that I am. And that's why I say I never found my tribe. I really just feel like I'm adrift.
That's crazy to me that she's never been invited to a cookout. I ain't gonna lie, this is the part of the video, because I've seen this part before. This is the part of the video where I was like, not once? Like, you're telling me there's nothing else there. And I know it's like, I'm not trying to discredit any of her experiences or say that any of the things that she's saying, is wrong. I'm not trying to question the authenticity of her experience. But I'm just like, what was said? What was said and what was taking place that you didn't get invited not once? Like, what did you say? And I'm like, well, maybe it's just the tribalism of it all. And people was just like, oh, maybe she doesn't want to hang with people like us, or maybe they have assumptions that she's anti-black. I don't know. But I'm just like, dang. I mean, especially now with the developments. I mean, she's talking about back then, but I'm like, damn, like, there's not a black anime club. There's not I don't know. I'm just like, there's not a black, alternative club. Like, I just feel like, I'm like, see, there's nothing in Atlanta? Nothing? Not once? I don't know.
People, we're not meant to be alone. Okay, so I see a coconut is someone who is Indian because they're brown on the outside. I'm reading something where it says these stereotypes prevent people from being their true authentic selves because they feel as though they have to fit into a very narrow mold. And she spelt mold with a U. Ugh. Something that I do like that this article mentions is, if you've been on the receiving end of these racial slurs, Dr. Misty offers a reminder that they say a lot more about the person who is dishing them out than you. They're expressing discomfort because you're not acting in a way that they think you should. That is exactly what it is. You're making this other person feel uncomfortable with your you-ness. She says if you feel able to, she suggests calling them out and letting them know how their comments affected you. Don't do that. You will get bullied mercilessly if you did that. It really hurt my feelings when you called me an Oreo. No, don't do it. My advice would be double down, bitch. Be like, yeah, I am an Oreo. What, bitch? How many books did you read? Oh, I would so say that. Man, little Brianna I could help her out so much. So I'm reading this story on, is it called Our Social Skills? I still don't know how to read the Reddit post names, the Reddit thread names. It says being an Oreo, being a black person who doesn't act like the stereotypical black person. I always feel like I need to change certain aspects of myself and fake myself even more on top of my anxiety. And this applies to when I'm with both white and black people, even though I feel like white people don't mind as much. Every single time I start to open to people and start revealing who I truly am, people say I am the whitest black person they've ever met, even though I'm literally just being myself. I even have a separate Spotify playlist for me to show my black music to other black people so I don't face ridicule. I listen to quite a lot of Korean and Japanese music. Same. As a result, these days, I've started to isolate myself more in my house where I can just enjoy myself without ridicule. Anyone feel the same? Me, I definitely feel the same. God, my dog is...
You know what caught me from all of that? A lot of that is valid, right? But it's when she said, even though white people don't care as much. The reason white people don't care as much is because, oh my gosh, I'm contradicting myself, but it's because you're acting white. And what I mean by acting white, right? I'm going to clarify that, right? Because I know it's like, bitch, you just said. But what I mean by that is that there's certain aspects that is associated with white culture, right? So if you're somebody, let's say you're black, you got the blonde hair, right? You got the struggle bangs. I've seen some black girls who have the struggle bangs. That's really a signifier. You know that photo that Beyonce had back in the day where she was wearing those struggle bangs, I think in the 2000s. Yeah, and she never wore them again because she was like, oh, like that wasn't a moment. But yeah, that's kind of the look that I'm talking about, you know. And there's different types of looks, but it's different for everybody. But I think some black people, they have this thing where they're like, white people don't care as much, and I'm like, they don't care as much because you're emulating certain things that even though they wouldn't call it culture, they know that mostly white people do this, right? Mostly white people are in these spaces. Mostly white people are in the goth space, the alternative scene, you know, and the only reason we don't call it white culture is simply due to the fact that whiteness has become a thing where, again, it is the default. And so, you know, white people have created this culture that is just them existing, you know. It is just being an American. That is what white culture is. And as an American, as the default, you know, you could do whatever the hell you want to do, right? You don't really have to call it culture. You don't really have to sit there and say anything about it until we start having nitty gritty conversations or we go into in depth about, oh, this culture and that culture, and we start talking about it, right? You know, you could sit there and you could just exist in that particular type of fandom. And it also does help that in other parts of the world, in order, the way that they will market towards black people. I said this in my Anime is So White video, where I was reacting to two black dudes who lived in Japan, and they said that for the longest time that in Japan they were marketing a lot of their things to Japanese people. They were marketing it with white people. We have to talk about, you know, anti-blackness in a universal standpoint, anti-blackness all around the world, and what that really means in terms of how that benefits whiteness, right? Because white people may not even really understand that dynamic, and people of color may not even understand that dynamic because of just how big it is. But, you know, if there's other people around the world who also have anti-blackness, who also share certain sentiments of white supremacy, I feel like it makes it easier for you to be able to navigate into other people's cultures, considering how they're so willing to allow you to do so. Considering how it's so much part of history for them to just allow certain people to do it, right? That's why there's this big thing where black Americans is like, you guys always complain about race, you guys always complain about all of these different things with your culture, you guys just keep complaining. And yes, a part of that is valid, but the other part of it is it's because we had to deal with what it means to create your own culture.
As cultural homelessness, which, bitch, that resonates with me intensely. I definitely feel culturally homeless. I think the worst part is that I thought it was going to get better as I got older. And I think that if I had known that it was never going to change, I would have stopped trying so much earlier and I would have started working towards self-acceptance a lot sooner. I think that I always thought black people were eventually going to start liking me because I was being a pick-me for them. Eventually, I'll meet the right people. Normally, like I said, I've been saying this a few times, normally when people are talking about racism and racism that black people receive, it's always from white people. But literally, I've discovered through my various friend groups and people that I've been around, nobody respects black people. They think that we're all beneath them, is what I've learned. That means the Hispanics, that means the Asians, all of them. Nobody really respects black people, okay? But something that I think is interesting, this idea that there are black people who have spent so much time being called things like ghetto and ratchet and hood and being labeled these things that have deeply scarred them for enjoying the black things that they do enjoy, that they feel like they have to protect that identity. And a lot of people have decided to protect that identity by doubling down on their blackness. What, I'm ratchet? Yes, I am ratchet. Watch me twerk upside down on a wall. I've done that. And I still wasn't black enough. Watch me rap some Megan Thee Stallion lyrics on top of a table. These are all things that I've seen in real life. But I definitely get that sense from a lot of black people. And I think black people are really defensive about their black identity, which is very understandable. I know I've said a lot about how much it sucks to be an Oreo and how I hate it. And I wish that people would not make fun of people for being Oreos. But I get it. It comes from a place of First of all, humans are tribalistic. That's how we have existed for thousands of years. We're all very tribalistic, which just means we want everybody to be mostly the same. Most humans are conservative. We want people to be like us. We want people to exist like us and keep our traditions and things like that. Most people don't really want to do work when they meet new people or when they're interacting with people. So if somebody has to treat you differently than they treat everybody else, or if somebody has to have different expectations on how a situation or a conversation might go with you versus everybody else, that might frustrate them, right? So they're putting you in this difficult category. And then especially if you live in a country that's predominated by white people and white culture, here Black people are trying to have and enjoy and protect their culture when somebody who is inside of their group, their demographic, is acting in a way that the predominant privileged majority is acting. I could see how that would upset some people, and I could see how that would make people feel threatened, and I get it because I agreed with that for a very long time. For the longest time, I would rather have extricated the Oreo parts of my personality and just left the Black pulp that was left over and be accepted by my community than to force my community to just embrace me as I was. That's what old me would have preferred. The current me, I'm too far separate from, I think I'm just too far separate from culture now. When I turned 26, I effectively decided I'm gonna stop trying to appease Black people. I just had enough. I remember there was a party that the Black people on my job had, and they invited everybody. They invited all my Latina friends, all the Latino people at my job, and they did not invite me. And so when I had a party at my house, I invited all my friends, which were predominantly Latina. I remember the next day or the next week, one of the Black girls who had thrown the party was like, I heard you had a little shindig at your house. Why didn't you invite me? And I said to her face, and this was at work in front of a group of people, I was like, when you had your party, you didn't invite me, so I just thought you didn't fuck with me like that. And she didn't have anything to say. And she walked out, and I needed it.
Damn. That's crazy because the fact that she didn't have shit to say and she walked out, like, those girls was really, you're a really mean girl. You're a really mean girl. That's crazy though, that she's in Atlanta of all places and there she's having to experience that with Black people. I'm like, girl, like, even the Black people I've been around that would be considered like whitewashed, I'm like, I still like, I fuck with them, you know, I still like, you know, I fuck with anybody who fuck with me. That's just how I am. But it's just crazy to me. It's crazy to me how she's had that experience, and it's crazy to me how she hasn't had, you know, the ability to, I mean, she said she has Black friends, but from what I'm seeing, like, she said she just given up on, like, the Black community altogether. It's crazy. But I do like how she acknowledges why this persists as well as critiquing it. I find that people who critique it, they often don't go into the roots of why it's happening. They don't go into, they don't attempt to try to figure out why that even persists or why that has taken place, right? And I think that that's a problem when we have conversations like this, where you do have a lot of Black people online, and they have talked about being not Black enough, being an Oreo, being whitewashed, and they have every right to talk about that experience, but nobody has ever tried to have the introspection or try to look within the fine lines, you know, within that particular type of phenomenon, and ask themselves, why did this happen? Why do they treat you this way? You know, a lot of people probably want to do that. It's just easier, especially with this trend that's going on now with a lot of Black people, where they're just like, I hate being Black, you know, I hate Blackness. And it's a lot of hate. And I think a lot of people are kind of conflating self-hate, hating Blackness, anti-Blackness with somehow a critique, holding accountable, wanting to be better. Those two are not the same. Those are not in the same categories. And so I think that that's a problem when we're having issues or certain things, where we're debating these things or we're having conversations or even giving our own testimonies, where we need a lot more people to be like her, who's saying, I'm not fucking with it no more, I'm doing me. But I also can sympathize or understand why this has happened. I can understand why this takes place. You know, this is just the way it is. This is certain stuff that I wanted to bring to this platform. And so I appreciate this, honestly.
soul. And I stopped trying to impress black people. Like I said, everybody's racist towards black people. It feels different when a culture that is not the one that you grew up with is isolating you, or I guess believe stereotypes about your culture, right? Versus when the culture that you've grown up in or raised in, identify the most with, is ostracizing you or isolating you or separating you. It feels different. Now, my friends are very diverse. I'm gonna be honest. I have a lot of white friends now, and they don't always get it. I can tell that they're patient with the things that they don't know. And I, in turn, are patient with the things that they don't know. And I appreciate that they respect me enough to want to be respectful to me. Most of my white friends don't say horrifically racist things in front of me. Sometimes if they let something slip, one of them in particular is very young. She said quite a few ignorant things. And I just gotta let her know, yo, you can't say that. In conclusion with this story, I'm still on my own authentic self journey. I'm really finally just trying to release the shackles of being called an Oreo my entire life and letting that really affect me to the point where it's paralyzed me in certain areas of my life. I'm really discovering, who am I? There was so much about myself that I didn't realize wasn't authentic to me. It was all extra stuff that I had added to my personality during the period of my life when I was trying to be black. And I didn't realize that it wasn't authentic to me until I really stopped and I thought, I'm like, am I doing this because I want to do this? Why am I actually doing this? It's been a great journey and I've really loved it. And I want to finish on a quote from our social skills in Reddit, in the Threadit. It's from a deleted user. It only got 3 upvotes, but I really like how this person worded it. If you made it this far, I just thought this would help any black person out there who is struggling with their identity, struggling with feeling like an Oreo or like you're not being accepted by black.
That's not me. So the video's already pretty long. That's not me, so I'm just gonna move it on. I forgot I made this I just made a video reacting to someone talking about this exact issue. Let me read what I wrote. I forgot I commented with my 9,000 likes. I just got 9 likes. Okay. I just made a video reacting to someone talking about this exact issue. I find what you said about blackness and how it feels like there is no way for us to be individuals is indicative of the trauma of being a minority in the country. I know people hate talking about white supremacy and racism, but that tribalism and clinging on to certain cultural artifacts to identify blackness is a byproduct of trying to cling onto an identity as people. We were stolen from our homelands, and as years went by, we created something else. The issue is, though what we created is beautiful and a blessing, it is also flawed because it came from a lot of trauma. You have black people hurting other black people because of homophobia, misogyny, religion, and so on. On one hand, I understand hating black people and feeling hurt by them. On the other hand, I understand the anger and frustration from black people towards some of these Oreos due to how they can internalize that anger and project anti-blackness, racism, and other ideals of the black community that are just as detrimental to our progress with things like gang violence and drug abuse in the inner cities. It is a tricky situation to navigate because both sides are valid in their frustrations, yet not in their actions due to said frustrations. So being black is a never-ending cycle of putting on and taking off many hats. And you get angry if you do or if you don't. It's so dumb. Yes, I 100% agree with everything you said. Not the creator agreed. Okay. The K-pop one is very interesting. Let's look at some comments. Being an Oreo is literally just not being a damn stereotype. How are you going to judge me because I have different interests than you? People are dumb. True. As you pointed out with K-pop, why is it that liking Asian music makes you white? What the fuck? That doesn't make sense. I've always hated it when people have this monolithic view of black people. I got the same thing for liking anime back in the day. I agree with so many things in this video. It's kind of insane. It's actually crazy to me because if you really look at a lot of different Asian media, especially anime or even K-pop, especially K-pop, they literally have a lot of different things that come from Black American culture. Now, are they going to admit it? Are they going to acknowledge it? Are they going to downplay it? Who knows? They probably will. But they have a lot of different Black American influences within their creations. So it's very interesting to say that you are whitewashed by looking at something like K-pop. And I believe, wasn't it a black man who brought anime to America? I believe it was a black man who brought anime to America or helped bring help really, I guess, like promote anime to America. I've definitely been told I act white, got white grades, do white things. If it wasn't me being not black enough, it was too quiet. It was sometimes still is truly confusing and annoying. Till this day, I don't even feel like hanging with an all black group. I always go for a mixed crowd because I find them more fun and understanding. Nowadays, to say my black card has been gone and I don't even want that shit back. Ugh, that's so sad. That's sad. That's sad. My family is a Caribbean, and so although I grew up in the hood, I was super different. Yeah, for people who are African, I'm not gonna even fully like get into that because for people who are African who, still connected to their African roots or their like Caribbean roots, Jamaican roots, whatever, they also go through the same thing because it is just a different presentation of blackness, and if it's a different presentation of blackness, it will be considered, not black, or it will be white adjacent, because that's the unfortunate thing about growing up specifically in America. Everything that is not the stereotype of blackness will be considered whiteness, and that needs to change because that often gives so much that gives a lot to white supremacy, right? Even if you're not trying to make a white supremacist country, that does give a lot to white supremacy because it makes whiteness the default, or allows whiteness to continue to be the default, and white people could just go in and out of certain different things, and then we get mad at them being like, oh my gosh, that's not fair, why do white people do this and why do white people do that, right? It reminds me of when people say, white people, I wish we had this version of a white singer. I wish we had a black version of Chapel Roan. I wish we had a black version of this particular white artist. And I said we do. You guys just don't support them because they act white. I wish we had a black version of this white character or this. We do. We have a lot of different things like that, but it's not being supported. And yes, maybe because it's not underfunded, or maybe it's buried between so many other different types of artistic projects. But a good amount of times, it's like black people, we have this thing where we want to have different things, we want to have different stuff that we support, we want to have diversity, but when certain things like that come, it's like it's never good enough, it doesn't hit, it's not 100% a masterpiece right then and there, and so we should just get rid of it altogether. And I just feel like we have to kind of work on that as a community and support people. I'm on various different types of platforms, various different types of pages where it's like for black animators, black filmmakers. And from time to time, there is like conversation, discussion about the different issues and the different complexities of what it means to be a black director, artist, film producer, so on and so forth. And other times, you see a good amount of different types of, great animations, great filmmaking, great stuff like that. And it barely gets any type of engagement, depending on the page you're on, depending on the different types of films that you're creating, it barely gets any engagement. And so many people are like, okay, you were talking about, we're talking about, building and having more for, black people and more for, black creators and more better black representation and expanding what it means to be black, right? But, you have to support that. You have to stop giving so much to white people. And you have to really really watch out for what happens when you do say, oh, that's just another version of black person. What happens when it does change? That will become a threat to white America. Now, it may seem like it won't, right? Because it's not a big deal, but that would become a threat to white America. So it is beneficial to white people that black people maintain this ideal that we only can stick to the stereotypes. We can't expand blackness. It's impossible. The damage has been done, or, the foundation has been laid. We can't change that, and pass that down to our children. They change that, and slowly throughout the generations, it becomes, this is just another version of blackness versus, or this is just another interpretation of blackness versus that it's just, a black person acting white.